everybody, welcome to the live stream. Hopefully once a week live stream here on YouTube at filmmakeriq.com. If you catch me staring off in that direction, that's where my computer screen is. It's actually a large TV, so I will probably be staring over there a lot, but I can stare at the lens here. All right, you know what I forgot to do before I first start these things? I usually have to set up my comment section and get it all running. So let's do that real quick on the screen, blah, 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 to turn on, and go to the form. And let's see, you should get a comment coming in here real soon, and we'll get started on the discussion for today. My topics are Fleabag, AI, and the end of science, plus your questions, whatever you want to talk about. Andre Sheffrin says, hi, how you doing? Hey, Rick H is in the house. Skeleton Films, hello, how are you doing? Okay, so I usually start these off. I realized, you know, I started teaching my class. I do a video production class at the college nearby, and I believe we're on week 4 this week, so we're kind of a month in. And this year, I wanted to do this semester. I tried something new. I'm going to have them do viewing reflections. I don't know how. Hopefully, they're all keeping up to date with it. I mean, there are points assigned to it. If they basically once a week, I say you've got to watch something. You've got to watch a movie, a streaming show, or a commercial, or a TikTok video. I don't care what it is. Watch something, and then write down what you thought about it and how you want to apply it to your own work. And I think that's what these live streams have become, is by basically my weekly reflection. First thing, so I wanted to talk about this show called Fleabag. Without me totally describing it, I'm going to do this. I'm going to play for you the trailer on Amazon, and it'll kind of give you a sense and flavor of what the show is about. Maybe, maybe not. Let's just take a look at it, and I'll come back here in a second as we watch the preview here. Hopefully this doesn't get me demonetized. I hope it won't for copyright, but let's see what that looks like. Here we go, and hit play. All right, so there's the trailer. I'll be honest, I don't think that trailer does that show quite justice. It's a little, oops, it's still going. Turn it off here. It comes off sort of like a rom-com. I mean, it is sort of a rom-com. So let me go back and kind of talk about, maybe, I don't know if you guys have heard about this show or not. You might have heard about Phoebe Waller-Bridge. For some reason, there's been kind of there's been a lot of talk about her outside the show. And I've heard stuff. I think she was involved with Han Solo. She played the robot in Han Solo, one of the robots, and then now she's going to be involved with the new Indiana Jones movie. She's a major character in that, and then now she's talking about doing Tomb Raider, doing the writing for Tomb Raider. So I've heard of her name throughout this recent news, and there's at least the circles that I've been kind of following. There's kind of been a negative feeling about her. So I saw this show and I saw all this. You know, there's a lot of positive stuff about the show. I figured, well, I'll give it a try, see what it's like. And I honestly, at first I had some reservations about the show. It took me about a half a season to kind of get into it. Well, not get into it, but kind of get over those reservations. But the second season really kind of blew me away. Now let's go back and kind of talk a little about what this show is. So Phoebe Waller-Bridge was asked. Her background is she comes from a relatively rich family. Her background is kind of the private, institutional college, not necessarily Cambridge, but more well-to-do British acting background. Stuff like you see this a lot in Oxford or Oxford footlights and stuff like that. But she comes to that. So she had a friend invited her to do this. She invited her to do a 10-minute one-woman show at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. If you've ever been to a Fringe Festivals, they've kind of gone on and become part of other traditions. I was not part of a Fringe Festival, but I did tape a performance at a Fringe Festival. So a Fringe Festival is sort of kind of experimental, off-the-wall theater productions. So her 10-minute one-woman show eventually became kind of expanded upon to being a full one-woman show, and then they took it and fleshed it out to become a TV series. And essentially the idea, I think, with Fleabag was kind of, and it's interesting maybe take apart the name of the show, Fleabag, is that it is about a woman who is very, on the surface, very unlikable. Uh, in a way, she classifies herself as a feminist, but then the very first scene she asks, "Am I a bad feminist?" If we saw in that trailer, they're attending this feminist lecture, and the lecturer says, "Is there any of these women any of you out there would trade 5 years of your life for a better body?" And she instantly raises her hand, but no one else in the class does. And she asks, "Am I a bad feminist?" So she's kind of got that she comes from the very kind of posh sort of progressive kind of, for lack of a better term, woke, although I wouldn't call the show woke at all, but very progressive position, while also realizing all kind of the flaws that she's dealing with. And I'm kind of burying the lead a little bit here. The first season deals with the grief and trauma that she feels for losing her best friend in a situation. I won't go further explaining like how that happens. The YouTube chat has suddenly come to a standstill. It's weird. I have to hit refresh or something. But so what am I saying with that? So the first season deals with really the trauma and the regret of losing what would have been like a soulmate friendship that she has in the very first. Oh, there he goes. Now it's coming back. Yeah, it's just weird. Oh, is it slow mode? Is that I don't know. The live chat just seems was stuck there for a while. So I just hit refresh. Anyhow, it is a comedy though. It is a comedy in an essence. It's sort of like the American show Girls, in that the lead character is so sexually liberated. It's almost too sexually liberated, I feel. And the reason I would say that is because in the second season she does reverse that. It's a different, she has a different characterization in the second season. But the first season, the sexual liberation is sort of a mask for the trauma she feels, or the guilt she feels for essentially what happens to her best friend. And again, I don't want to spoil more because the rest is kind of going into spoiler territory. There are a tremendous number of fourth wall breaks. The story is essentially as if told to you in real time. It's like I'm telling you a story, but I'm acting it out at the same time. So I'm having a discussion with my friend over there. Don't you think that was a clever remark? And then I'll come back to it. As far as the second season, though, I mean, honestly, there is a little bit of a trying. The fourth wall breaks get a little bit tiresome, but the second season handles that so deliciously that I just was so like taken aback by how it happened. John Walter Mulsey asked, and this is in regards to the second season, because so it's not a spoiler so much to say is the second season. She pretty much I think she dealt with the trauma of the first season for the most part. So the second season, she eventually falls in love with a priest, the Catholic priest. And the story becomes sort of a will they, won't they situation, which I think handles the characters very, very well. And it portrays the Catholic priest not necessarily in a perfect light, because he obviously has some flaws, but there is kind of a maturity in the way it handles the subject matter. It's not, and she's an atheist, and he's obviously a believer, and there's a little bit of that struggle, and it feels like both characters walk away learning something. So John was asking here, what did the fox mean? There's a plot line basically. The priest is always feeling the foxes are after him, and have I sat down and analyzed what did the fox say? Do we know what the fox means? I don't. That's the great thing about art. I'm not sure you can say it. What the fox means. Maybe the way I would read it is maybe that the fox are the demons of the priest. The demons are always chasing him. They're all around every single corner. I feel like the alcoholism the priest exhibits, there is sort of that's like one of the demons that is chasing this Catholic priest. Sexual liberation is getting tiresome too, methinks. I think that's the wonderful thing about this show is that I don't see the sexual liberation necessarily as being portrayed in a positive light. Again, like the second season, she does admit that she stopped doing the constantly sleeping around with every single person that she's ever met, kind of a thing. Christopho says, do I have a new background? I have a new background for every single show you'll watch. It's kind of what I try to do, is always change the background. I definitely recommend Fleabag. I don't know what people, like I said, I feel like there's a general kind of dislike for Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Judging on solely this material, I don't really understand why there is a hesitation with her stuff. To me, it's very, the term I'll throw around is Woody Allen-esque. I used to be a huge fan of Woody Allen. I think now it's not fashionable to say you're a fan of Woody Allen because of the Me Too environment. Even though I feel like Woody Allen, it's weird. That's an understatement, right? We're talking about Woody Allen. It's weird what's going on with him and Mia Farrow and his stepdaughter who ended up being his wife. But the fact of the matter is, I don't know how much time they spent together as father and stepdaughter, because wasn't a traditional family to begin with, and it's all weird. We can all absolutely agree it's totally weird. But some of the movies that he's made have that introspective drama, comedy, tragedy sort of feel, and those are the movies that essentially got me to want to make movies myself and want to love cinema is those kind of stories. So to me, Fleabag fits the bill really, really well. I think the second season is better than the first, but the first season's required watching because then it introduces you to the character. You get a feel of the character. It's in the first season. It seems like the Fleabag character. Her name is. She doesn't actually have a name in the show. She's just the Fleabag, and which may be telling on how she sees the character, as herself. But the first season, it feels like it's all about her and how she's fallen apart. And the second season sort of shows that she's still falling apart, but everything else around her is also falling apart. It's a comedy of just different personalities combining and interacting. And I don't know. I think it's really, really good. People don't watch films for filmmakers. Kind of for comments. People don't watch film for filmmakers. Moral character, only Twitter does. Oh, is that okay? Filmmaker. Oh, for the filmmaker, moral character. Yeah. I interesting. There's the whole conversation. Yeah, whole conversation again. You're right about Twitter. Back when Lisa Ellis used to make videos, I was kind of a follower of hers. Just kind of, I enjoyed her. I never agreed with her political stance, but I always found her arguments for a while there. I could follow them. I can understand what that side was saying. Even though I think ultimately my approach toward art, my approach toward even philosophy and the world in general is really kind of opposite of hers. But she had a whole thing about the death of the author kind of thing. When can you at what point do you take an author's work and look at it besides the person creating it? And that kind of thing too. It boils down to how complex the world is and how complex people are. If to say that I don't like this guy's work because this guy once said this, do you really understand why that person said that thing, or the context of what they're trying to say in that? Again, I think I was talking a little bit about it last week in regards to D.W. Griffith and like Birth of a Nation kind of a thing, where I feel like, and this is just my sense of it, I feel like he didn't understand the racial implication of that movie. He thought he was making a movie that everyone agreed with. He's not doing anything bad at all. I think nowadays we may have coming from the other side of the civil rights movement, we can take a look at that movie and think, well, no, you didn't realize. I just don't think he in his heart thought he was making a racist movie. Although I think it's pretty clear and safe to say, from our perspective, even probably from their perspective, a lot of people had thought that movie was pretty racist in 1914. Let's not kid ourselves. But it's one of those things where his world was so small that he was blindsided to the reality of what he was doing. Anyhow, that's a long way. That's a weird philosophical way of coming around to it, right? Truth Mystery says, I just looked up, there are 9 passages involving foxes in the Bible. Interesting. I like that approach. So maybe there's a biblical implication to it too. That's what I mean. The show is very smartly written. For the characters, the character is an atheist. So you would think that writers and I think maybe the character atheist beliefs kind of mirror the author's opinions. I don't know. Maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe Phoebe Waller-Bridge is a devout Catholic. I doubt that's the case. Just giving that impression. But if she is writing from an atheist perspective, to be able to write a good, solid Catholic character is quite an accomplishment, I think. At least it's what makes art fun. You don't have to. It's the difference between art and propaganda, perhaps we want to say it that way. Propaganda is sort of message with a story around it, whereas art may be a story that you draw some meaning from. And the fun thing is we can all like sit around and figure out the different messages, and maybe, and again, that's part of the problem too when you're trying to write something that you think is art, and then part of me, having watched so many videos, essays about dissecting these movies, and like, oh, this really means this is symbolism for that, and this is you come into this you approach like screenwriting with this idea that you want to infuse the symbolism, you want to infuse all that. But sometimes maybe great art doesn't do that. Maybe great art has the stuff, it's there, but it's not, it's more under the surface, it's more open for interpretation. Maybe the artist not necessarily paints a reality, that the artist maybe reflects puts a mirror up to society, holds the mirror up and say, hey, look, this is what it is, without judgment. And that might be, I don't know, I'm blabbing obviously. Hey, Matthews, how you doing? I saw you earlier. Oops. I don't have any problem with enjoying anything I like that was made by bad people. Yeah. I mean, there are limits to it. Like if I saw something and it was like, it just didn't, if it was made by somebody that I knew was a serial killer, I might be thinking it'll be different. Rick H says, yeah, I think I'll pass. The only 2 British shows I've liked are Top Gear and The Prisoner. Everything else I've tried to watch ends with a quick channel switch. Well, the good thing about Fleabag, though, it's a BBC production, so it's only 6 episodes. So if you get tired, if you can always check out, it's not that long. I got through it basically in a week. It's, like my perfect movies that I deeply enjoy end up being personal. Like I love personal stories. Like that's somebody on Twitter asked what movies got you into filmmaking. I think it was the Rain Dance Film Festival asked it. So I replied, I liked Wonder Boys and Mulholland Drive were the 2 movies that when I was coming of age, those are the 2 movies that made me say, this is the kind of stuff I want to do. Is Wonder Boys and Mulholland Drive. Wonder Boys is very much more of a what they call them, screwball comedy. Very much of a screwball comedy, but it's very interpersonal, and it dealt with feelings of impotence. I guess really is, now that I think about it, it's really a matter of impotence. As the artist was impotent, he was trying to write his second book after his big critical success book. In his second book was like 1,300 pages, the first draft, so he's still working on it. But it's 1,300 pages, he only got like halfway through. And then Mulholland Drive obviously is a much more open-ended, but again, small stories, very small, peculiar. Everything is tied up in the smaller space. So I gravitate, again, movies like Annie Hall. I really loved Annie Hall. Some of the other Woody Allen movies. What's that movie the Paris one? One Night in Paris or something with Owen Wilson. Oh, wow. That guy. That was really good. That was kind of Blue Jasmine was really good too. Of course, Cate Blanchett has some pretty nasty words for Woody Allen after that. There we go. Try watching Sunk on World, Yes Minister, and Thick of It. British comedy are art. I heard they keep pushing Sunk on the World for me, so I gotta check it out. Yes, Minister, I've heard. Um, Again, I love shows like Peep Show. Peep Show, one of my all-time favorite shows of all time. I mean, you could say Fleabag is sort of a feminist version of Peep Show, maybe. Not really. Blackadder. Here we go. Some good lists. Blackadder, Red Dawn, Faulty Towers, Mr. Bean, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So I've watched all but Red Dawn. But Blackadder, Faulty Tower, Mr. Bean are among. Mr. Bean is just amazing. It's just freaking amazing. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Yeah, Hitchhiker's Guide is an interesting show because it first started off as a radio play, then it became a book, then it became a TV show, then it became a movie, and then it became a show again. I don't know. And then the books and the movies and the play and the radio shows all kind of like they're all sort of iterations of the same story. So they each version gets like updated with some new kind of jokes and new ideas. Wait a second, that was Owen Wilson on my screen. Oh wow, really? Wow. Let's go crash that party. Wow, really? Sorry. I love the scene in Mulholland Drive at the diner. Yeah, again, part of Mulholland Drive's appeal for me was just how much was done in that movie, and it's just like people talking in a diner. I gotta watch that movie again. It's been a while since I watched Mulholland Drive. Nate Doller said he loved Babylon. So here's the thing with Babylon and me. I get people that love that movie. I totally get it. But you got to realize I hate it with a passion of a fiery burning suns. 100 burning suns. I hate that movie so hardcore. I just hate that movie so bad. However, I recognize people love it. But you have to recognize if you love it, there are people like me, and I'm not alone, that absolutely hate that movie with a fiery passion. So, look, the fact of the matter, we can exist. The art is in that essence. I think though, I just think if you love that movie, you are basically a Emperor's New Clothes situation. And I guess I'm not being bad. If you see the Emperor's walking down the naked, and you're thinking, man, that's a freaking sweet piece of clothes he's got on there, that's your reality. And how am I there to judge to say that you're wrong? And we're kind of jumping ahead. I'm kind of jumping ahead of the AI discussion. I was going to talk about that a little bit later. My last part was the end of science. And the concept that with my and I'm going to try to explore this topic a little bit more. I'm going to come back in a little bit. Maybe I'll come back and deal with this topic. But if you like Babylon, I will say you don't understand anything about movies. But that doesn't erase the fact that you like the movie, and it shouldn't. Because why do you need to have to qualify yourself for liking something? There's no reason to. Like, if you like something, you like it. You know what I mean? Just because I think the opinion is unfounded doesn't take the fact that you like it. You know, just to jump ahead a little bit, on my video, 24 frames a second. Now, Matthias, I know we said we weren't talking about frame rate, but we will talk about frame rate. You can't escape it. But my objection is that people constantly use the word objectively incorrectly. And I hear this over and over again. Last Jedi is objectively the worst movie ever made. It's like, no, it's not. It's not objectivity. That's subjective. Everything is subjective. Like, objectivity is Star Wars Last Jedi is a movie. That's objective. We can all agree it is a movie. Some people might disagree, but objectively speaking, it is a movie. But but subjectivity, there is a overarching feeling in young people and society in general that subjectivity is somehow less important than objectivity. And I think we're in for a very rude awakening. That subjectivity, and this is not my own theory because this goes back hundreds of years, that subjectivity is ultimately all we have. That there is no objectivity, especially in terms of art. It's all subjectivity. It's all subjectivity. It's all subjectivity all the way down. Turtles all the way down, but subjectivity instead. Yeah. Don't conflate taste with standards. There you go. Don't conflate taste with standards. Something can be well done, and I still hate it. On the opposite as well. Yeah, but aren't standards in a way a subjective measurement of things? End the Void, Enter the Void, very original open titles. I showed that, and when I did my titles thing, I don't like the titles for Enter the Void, but they get what they get what they're trying to do in that. Sallow 120 is your favorite comedy movie. Itchy the Killer and Enter the Void. All right. If you watch 1899, how did you like the virtual production stage called Volume that was used? I didn't see 1899. I think I saw some stuff on Twitter where they're showing that water that washes ashore and then pulls away and washes ashore, and then they pan the camera over, and it's like literally a stage because it's the whole thing is just one LED screen, and it's just like impossible to know the difference. It's impressive. It's impressive. I will warn people though, it doesn't change the realities of filmmaking. It just adds a different tool to the tool set. That's all it does. It doesn't change though. It doesn't change anything. If you enjoy Babylon, then you are a bad person. Back of the 18th American Constitution. John Hancock actually put his big giant signature right underneath that. If you enjoyed Babylon, you are a bad person. What about the people who like SF because the mass like it? It's what I think most audiences respond to. I think you're not wrong on that. It's like going with the crowd, essentially, just going with, what the crowd says. I don't think there's a person alive that doesn't have some sort of that force tugging on them in some way. Like I got a lot of hate messages for saying I did not like Squid Game. I hate Babylon worse than I hate Squid Game. I don't like Squid Game. I thought it was a lame show. I didn't like it at all. But man, the comments I got on that were nasty because I was going against the grain. Anybody that goes against the grain, and honestly, I'm a people pleaser. I don't like conflict, but got a lot of conflict. And, do you think that maybe shut me up about some shows? A little bit, maybe, Arseny says, Babylon reminded me of Don't Look Up, when the director thinks he's smarter or cooler than the viewers. I never saw Don't Look Up, so I don't know where that's coming from, but there's what Arseny says. I mean, I don't know how to judge that comment, but there it is. Let's see. On 1943 Looney Tunes short, Coal Black and the Seven Dwarves. Oh my God, that's already sounding like it's going to be a racial issue. Director John Clampett sincerely meant it to be a homage to black people, but the 1940s white person's racist version of black people. Yeah, exactly. I think it wasn't Uncle Tom's Cabin. Wasn't that supposed to be written to kind of show black people to white audiences in a way? But it obviously backfired. It backfired too. Well, even for a long time, it's been seen that. Max has given me a compliment, so I must read those. Great video on exposing the exposure triangle fallacy. I share it quite often. Wish I didn't have to, but this is the world we live in. So let's talk real quick. Let's just get to the next subject that I wanted to talk about, which is AI. I've been playing a lot with AI recently, and I gotta admit, it's growing on me. So that background behind me, if you can't tell, it is AI generated. And I think from going on forth, I think for the live stream, I'm going to just AI generate whatever I'm feeling for that day to create my backgrounds. I think that's kind of cool. The thing with AI, and I was able to install this thing called, it's Automac 111, Automac 1111. And there's this experimental script that allows you to embed what they call stable diffusion into Photoshop, and allow you to do all the AI stuff in Photoshop, and that way you can immediately see the results there. You can manipulate using Photoshop tools to correct things and fix things up. And I gotta admit, it's pretty powerful. And I spent a lot of hours playing with it because, frankly, it's one of those things where it's like rolling the dice. It's literally a slot machine. You're seeing if you're pulling the slot machine and seeing if you get a good result. And here's the thing. AI art is great if you don't have like a photography background. Like when I do photographs, when I do any kind of visual art, like a still images, stuff like that, I have become hyper critical. Like I see like every detail. When I go out and shoot my own photos, like I'll shoot a photo and I think this is really good, but man, I don't like that angle. It'd be better if I was just slightly to the left. That way it could create a little more parallax there. Oh, I like this, but I don't like this one thing here. You know, with Photoshop, you can spot heal tool. You can liquefy and create some different shapes. You can do some stuff with it. So AI is infuriating for that reason, because there are things that I see in a shot that AI produces and I think, this would be perfect if it weren't for this detail here. And so you go through it and you throw a remix it, and then change the parameters slightly, and it comes back and it's this little detail here. That's why I thought the idea of being able to do it in Photoshop was so useful, because I can create all these and I can blend them together. I could also do what's it called in and out paint, where you would say just fix this section, just redo this section, and make it fit into the rest of the thing. So that's powerful. But it's will it replace traditional art? No. I think there was an interesting somebody was talking about the law of fast emerging technology. And Scott Adams was talking about this morning. And here's the law. Basically, any technology, you will overestimate the impact it has on today. And I see this all the time. Every single time I open up YouTube and I look at some tech channels, what's the one title you always see on any tech channel? And the title will be, "This changes everything." Anything to do with AI, this changes everything. I've seen that so many times, and it never does. We overestimate the effect that any one technology. Oh, that's my friend Joe calling. I'll call him back. We overestimate the effect that technology has on us, on what's happening today. However, we underestimate the effect technology has in the long run. So I think that's the thing with AI art. It's not as useful as we think, it doesn't change everything today. However, 10 years from now, maybe stock photography illustrative stock photography maybe become a thing of the past. Like, why would I go to Getty, pay $70 for an illustrative photo of a woman on a tablet, for my BS article about women and tablets? Why would I pay a bunch of $270 for the rights to a stock photo when I can just AI produce something that's going to be more illustrative of what I'm trying to do? So I think that's where that's going to, we're going to alter things like that. I'm starting to think, like, how can I apply this AI technology to, so I've been doing some work with the Chamber of Commerce. So I'm like, doing some graphic design work. How can I apply this and use this to augment and help create better ideas for what I'm trying to do with them? And if they ask me to do a program or something, or what can I do? So anyhow, when everything changes, nothing changes. I don't know. AI runs on a computer. So I think AI normally uses AI models to do comparisons with objects it sees, so it's different. I think we talked about this the other day. I was thinking about how basically AI essentially averages a bunch of inputs, like a big library set, right, of all the different possible things out there, and it kind of puts it together and then tries to evaluate, does this make sense? ChatGPT is also another. I was playing around with ChatGPT a little bit, and I was asking some personal questions, because just a quick side note. Yesterday, I wanted to stream yesterday, but my mom had a little accident in her pants, and when that happens, I feel like I can't do anything. I mean, I'm not quite desensitized to the accident that happens in the pants. It destroyed me emotionally yesterday. So I was like, I couldn't do anything but sleep it off that yesterday. So I didn't stream yesterday. I wanted to actually come in here. I actually have a script written for the next video that I'll talk about in a second here. Yeah, I didn't do anything yesterday. So I started chatting with ChatGPT and kind of like just pouring my heart out to ChatGPT. It wasn't bad. I'll be honest. Like I was asking the ChatGPT personal questions and it was answering me. And I thought, I don't feel so bad now. I feel more, I feel more more, what was it? More analytical. I started becoming more analytical. It's like, whoa, what can you say, ChatGPT? Matthew says, anyone who's satisfied with AI's artwork has used AI for a given purpose instead of hiring anyone to make art would never be willing to pay a lot of money to hire an artist to begin with. Yeah, I think, that, like I said, you're right. I think that was a problem I had with even something like this background. It took me like 5 or 6 different tries. So I spent about 45 minutes coming up with this, well, maybe not 30 minutes, coming up with this background, right? And I was picking like, I saw like at least 25 different versions of this. And if I were to look closer to this, there are elements that I wouldn't necessarily like about it. But for the purposes of this program, I don't mind that if, maybe back here, those particular buildings don't look quite realistic. Yeah. Would you consider all the deep learning upscale techniques as AI because they do amazing things? Well, when I say AI, I'm really referring more toward or this kind of, I don't know, there's a term for it. It's this idea where you can convert text to images and ChatGPT kind of an AI. I'm not so much thinking about the AI that's like sharpening kind of thing, where it basically tries to go in and tries to refigure out the signal, the pixels. In a way, isn't motion smoothing sort of AI too? I mean, in a sense. But I think that's the AI I'm referring to. And the Tinkle Tink makes a point that can AI think? No. And I think that is really the misnomer in our discussion about AI is we're treating it as a person, and it's not necessarily a person, and it's not thinking the way a human thinks. Kind of like what we said, that. Basically, I was saying, so rehash what I was saying the other day. If I asked AI to draw me a hand, like AI would basically look at all the pictures of hands in its data set library, and it would kind of sum them up and try to figure out, okay, well, I think this is okay, and it draws a hand, and maybe it comes out with a pretty decent hand. But then I say, okay, AI, draw the exact same hand, but flip it the other way. And then the AI doesn't understand that because the AI approaches the idea of how to draw a hand not by knowing what a hand should look like, but by knowing what depictions of the hand should look like. So it has to research through the entire library of data set. Okay, this is what a hand looks like from the back. What does it look like from the palm? So it's got to figure out. So it's approaching the drawing of the hand in a different way. If you gave it to human artist said, tell the human artist, draw me a hand, and then draw palm side up, the artist would understand, okay, hand, palm side. The way we think about the creation of that image is completely different than the way AI, as I understand it, thinks about it. Now, maybe the way the human thinks about it will eventually be translated and put into machine code and figured out that way. So who knows? I don't know. But anyhow, does it change everything? In the short term, no. In the long term, yes. But in the short term, no. I'm sick and tired of all these YouTube titles that say this changes everything. Okay, I'm looking at you, Corridor Digital, because I remember they did this thing about this one artificially intelligent it's say voxel creation. You take your phone and you shoot like a bunch of angles of something, and then it creates sort of a volumetric representation of the object, which allows you to fly by in 3D technology with a 3D camera. They said this changes everything. I haven't heard anything about it. I tried it. It's okay. It works pretty good. But I don't think it changes everything. I think it adds another tool to what we always have to do, and that's just be creative artists and stuff like that. account for comment. Similar to humans, machine takes inputs, thinks, create outputs. It's not much. It's really not really much complex. I disagree. I think humans, we have a conceptual understanding of the object that we're thinking about. So our inputs are given to us, but we build on our experiences. Again, building on experiences. Again, I think we fall in the trap of language. Like, we're talking about how we're shortcutting the way AI works by using words like AI thinks, where it's not the process of AI thinking is not the same process as a human thinking. It's a completely different process. That's a good segue. Let's jump into my last topic that I want to talk about. So I have been really trying to finalize the script for my next little video that I'm going to put out there. And I really want to try to be very, very, John, try Midjourney. That was Midjourney. I think Stable Diffusion is better for some things. Midjourney, for something like that, I just wanted to knock something out. Midjourney was good enough. Stable Diffusion, for drawing humans, Stable Diffusion is scary good. Scary. Anyhow, my point. Let's go back to my point. I have been trying to finish the script for my next video, and I want to make it as good as I can because I feel like it is a pop science topic, which might mean it gets more views outside of my regular filmmaking circle subscribers. Just you guys are the serious filmmaking subscribers. I think my next video, which is titled "What is the frame rate of the human eye?" And we just talked about how the way the human thinks is different than the way the computer thinks. But the way we talk about AI, we use the language of human thinking, and that conflates it and makes us misunderstand what's really happening. The same thing is happening with the human eye. We use similar language like lens and pupil. I mean, those are really kind of brought over from, well, not necessarily from biology to camera. We make a mistake when we conflate camera technology with human vision. So, quick answer to the question, what is the frame rate of the human eye? The answer is there is none, because the human eye does not work like a video camera. It fundamentally is the wrong question to ask. And part of this was, again, point out Corridor Digital, they did a video, what if we made a camera with the specs of the human eye? And they were vastly incorrect about some of the things. They were saying that the human eye has 220 frames per second. It's got like a 28 megapixel. It's like, no, none of that is true, because we've built this model of understanding human vision based on a model of some other technology that has nothing to do with the human eye. And I think a lot of people will probably correctly point out in the chat, I know the previous chats, where the human eye, if you actually were to run a light through the human eye and put a digital sensor in our retina, it'd be a pretty piss poor quality, because the fact is it's meat. Your eyes are not ground glass. They're not finely tuned German shot glass that they've perfectly, no, they're bits of cellulose material, right? Your biology is not the kind of precision that German precision, of a camera, right? So we've completely, our understanding of the human eye is completely ruined by the fact that we're trying to make these models of connection. So, but this gets me down to like kind of the end of science, because as I write this thing, I have in my head, I mean, my original 24 frame per second video has 9,000 comments. My other videos, I mean, you're combining all the videos I've done on frame rate, you're talking, 30, 40,000 comments that I've literally read over the 8 years I've been doing that part of YouTube. So I've read every comment. Not a single comment goes by, usually, unless it's a reply comment, but not every original comment goes by without me reading it. So I've got all these voices on my head, criticizing, critiquing every word I'm saying about the topic of frame rate. And I start wondering, well, am I going to make any difference with this video? Am I saying anything new and novel with this video that has been said before, but doesn't matter, because people will just continually reach for that for that camera model. Like people are going to, the one myth that I want to, yes, Andre says the difference is not what maximum frame rate is, but what we perceive of motion as a series of photos. And you know what that number is? That number you're talking about, Andre, is 10 frames per second. That's what is generally accepted. Generally accepted psychology fields have determined the phi phenomenon, beta movement. Those are the two terms they call, that basically is a dividing line between still images and apparent motion is the terminology that they use. Apparent motion begins around 10 to 12 frames per second. So that's kind of going to be my clickbaity way of going about it. It's going to say, what's the frame rate of the human eye? It's 10 frames a second. Because that's the truth. Because the problem is, the question is faulty. It's not, 10 frames a second is where motion begins. It's the apparent visual motion. Apparent motion begins. But if you were to tell me that I experience my world through 10 frames a second, you're saying, no, of course I don't. Well, that's true. You don't. Because the question is faulty. Because we don't experience frame rate in motion. So, anyhow, going back to what I was saying, is my video going to make any dent in the world? And earlier somebody was complimenting me about the exposure triangle. Did that video make a dent in trying to get people to understand like the larger implication of exposure? The larger implication of human biology when it comes to vision and frame rate. People just continually reach for the basic model. And so that's what makes me afraid of what's happened to science. Because I grew up watching Mythbusters. I grew up watching Cosmos. I grew up watching the History Channel and Discovery Channel before they became platforms for reality competition shows or antiques digging, shows. I impart this channel, and essentially what I do on this channel is sort of a growth from that I like presenting science of things, but I feel like we've gotten to the point where now the science is its own story, and people just want to be entertained by so-called science rather than using it as a way to think about the world and maybe use it as a way to apply to the world. Does that make any sense to anybody what I'm talking about? Yeah, just to respond to your comments, I can just come back around a little bit. Andre says, so 60 versus 20 versus 240 make a difference in perceived fluidity. So I did a tweet and I did a comment on here saying that, so my point, I said that we need to stop thinking about 24 and 60 FPS as being, 60 FPS isn't more information to the viewer. It's different information. And I think your point is right there. It's a different kind of information when we show somebody at 60 frames a second versus showing them 24 or even 12, right? It's a different kind of information. It's not more information. And that was kind of like, to me, that was like, whoa. That was like a light coming off of my brain. That our brains don't, when we watch a 24 frames per second stream, or like I said, 12 or 60 or 100, our brains don't suddenly switch to a different mode. They're in the same mode. If we look at it 24 frames a second and then we look off into the real world and look back to our brains are not saying, hey, wait a second, we need to calculate more information or less information. It doesn't quite work that way. So now if we get down to let's get down to the really great, crazy thing, all right? Here's the real crazy thing. Okay, so do you know how the brain interprets motion? How does the brain interpret motion? How? Like physically how? What cells are involved? And if you do, then you obviously should write a paper because you would win a Nobel Prize because no one knows. No one knows how the brain actually understands motion. What they have, and this is and I kind of talk about this in my video about the frame rate of the human eye. I kind of talk about this, but I don't go into it that hard because it's still kind of a mystery to me. It's called Reichardt detectors. And the idea is, and this is, again, developed in the 1950s, I believe. It was Reichardt detectors. You've got one neuron attached to one, rod or cone, and another one that's attached over here. And then they both come down, the information comes down, but one signal is time delayed just slightly. And so when they come back together, this neuron, which is responsible for determining motion, if they match, then they realize, oh, there's some motion happening between these two neurons. So there's a little time delay function, right? And if they match, they know, oh, there's a little bit of movement. If they don't match, okay, there is no movement. So that's the theory. You know what the basis of that theory is? Anybody? Nothing. They just sat down and thought, if I were to design a motion system, how would it work? And that's how they designed it. They said, I think this is how the brain does it. There's no biological function. It wasn't a hypothesis built on biological information whatsoever. Now, is that a bad thing? I'm not saying it is, because that Reichardt detector test has been used a lot in the science of study of human motion, human perception of motion. So they've taken that model. It's called a black box model because they don't understand how it actually works, but they've developed tests to see if the model predicts what the tests would reveal. And for the most part, the model has been very successful, actually. So we have this black box model that we don't understand how the eye works at all. We have no clue how the neurons fire and makes. How do we figure? No, we don't know. But we've developed this whole field around it without understanding how the mechanism works, which also maybe leads to the question: are we designing the test to show that the model works? I don't know. When I read through these scientific articles, I try to understand them. Believe me, I try to. But they're so thick and full of a lot of jargony words that make sense probably to somebody that's deeply involved with the medical sciences of human perception. Not to me. I'm a lowly filmmaker. I just want to go back and make some movies. I want to go watch some Fleabag. Anyhow, so to go back to this black box theory, they have discovered some of that mechanism in flies. So they were able to find like a strip of neurons that indicate the movement of up, left, right, and down in flies, who have like multiple eyes, right? Flies have little tiny cells in their eyes. It's not one retina. So, I mean, it's when you stop and think about like human perception of frame rate, man, all these screaming teenagers that I get on my comment section saying, I can see 200 frames a second. The eye has an infinite frame rate. It's like, you have no clue what you're talking about. And, as I said, I grew up on Cosmos and Mythbusters, and those shows, in essence, I felt like I was being introduced to a new world of science, a new world of just, when I watch YouTube videos that talk about these. Last night I watched a show about a little video about the super heavy elements, the quest for super heavy, and I thought that was fascinating. And I love seeing this thing, but I feel like now, as a person that love Mr. Wizard style science and learning about how things work, it's fascinating. But I feel like the pendulum swings way hard the other way. And now it's science is the God. Science is the God that you must pray to. Everything has to be objectively true. It's objectively the worst acting you've ever seen. Babylon's objectively the worst movie ever. Objectively. Everything's sciences. We're going to science our way out of this thing, right? And it just feels petty now. Like we don't understand science. We don't understand what's purpose. What's the design and purpose of science? We lose the wonder, is what I'm trying to say. Physical media is forever. Buy Laserdisc, says Plotbot. The AI is coming to take me already. But Flies would be faster because its eyes would probably not go to a cognitive thinking part, but go straight to the reflexes. Humans are that way too, you know. Illusion of movement begins around 10 FPS, but if I'm not mistaken, you need tens of thousands of FPS to fool our brains to think it's seeing motion. No, so what it is, what the blur busters, and blur busters is interesting because I get, you know, I used to get pummeled with, oh, go to blur busters, look at these UFO tests, and you'll quickly learn why 24 FPS is bad. It's like, no, that's not what blur busters is saying at all. They're just trying to understand. So there's something called the phantom array effect. So if you take your cursor and you wiggle it around a screen, right, it creates multiple instances of that cursor. The question is, how fast of how many frames per second do you have to get to eliminate the phantom array effect? And that's their conclusion. The blur busters rule was like 1 frame per pixel of movement, right? So if it's a very slow moving object, then you can get away with a very low frame rate. But if it's a really fast frame rate, if it's a really fast moving, you know, thing, then you would need more frames in order to eliminate the phantom array effect, as I understand it. So their benchmark is about 1,000 frames a second. So 1,000 pixels per second is if a cursor is moving 1,000 pixels a second. So it's basically, that's not even that fast, right? 1,000 pixels a second. Imagine if you're on a 1920 by 1080 screen and you move your cursor, it takes you 1 second to go from to halfway through the screen. You know, if you just take 1 second, that would be perfect motion, right? 1 pixel per second. And again, it also deal with, you know, human acuity and stuff like that. So it's a little more complicated than just, you know, that basic stuff. So now you're talking like 10,000 frames a second. Okay, if you wanted that cursor to move perfectly smoothly, if you're moving it like at, you know, 1/10 of a second, if you flick your mouse, 10,000 frames a second would get that perfect motion without any phantom array effect kind of a thing. Anyhow, it's really interesting. That's what I feel. I feel like, and again, I guess I've been suckered into larger debates and larger discussions ever since I've been a little more on Twitter and reading up some things. And the problem is, I feel like science has become a mascot that we can just you know, beat the opponents with, and it you know, I won't try to sugarcoat it. The whole stuff with COVID. At first, it was believe the science, right? Believe all science, believe the science, believe the science. And now I feel like the other side, now that the vaccines are becoming a little, it's more admittedly less effective. Now the people that are the vaccine, I'm not saying the anti-vaxxers, but the vaccine, are saying, believe our science, believe the science, believe our science. We read the data, believe our science. And it's just like, there's nothing left. It's just believe the science. Believe the science, bigot. Either way, believe the science, any science. Your science, my science. They just become false gods, and we're just sitting around beating each other. And yes, it does have to do with frame rate. It's all tied in. Like the way I think about all this stuff is all tied into frame rate. And frame rate's just an easy vehicle for me to explore these things. Your 25 is great with the exception of the mistake. When you talk about studying pans of 24, you mentioned filmmaker mode addressed that, but that it was meant to help combat motion smoothing. I wish that filmmaker mode, I wish I had a TV that had it for one. I bought the Sony TV, the Sony AJ, whatever I had. I think I told you in a comment before, because it was on Artings. It was one of the higher rated TV sets on there. And I saw for the price, it was a little bit better price than the LG TV that I was looking at too. And so I got that one, and it doesn't have filmmaker mode. When I made that movie when I talked about filmmaker mode in that 124 FPS video, it hadn't come out yet. So I had no idea what filmmaker mode did. I wish it would do certain things. The video after Frame Rate of the Human Eye is going to be about BFI, about black frame insertion, which I think is an underappreciated, misunderstood, especially in terms of 24 frames a second. BFI is the reason why and this is my conclusion now, BFI is the reason why many kids watching movies on their computer monitors think that 24 FPS looks bad, because it does on their computer monitors. It just does. I'll be honest. I watch stuff on the 144 hertz monitor. It does not look as good as it would on a BFI monitor or something with a flicker. Anyhow, I'll get to that. Sam Harris versus Brett Weinstein. If you're gonna drag me into this, aren't you? I like Brett Weinstein more than Sam Harris. Any day of the week, I like Brett Weinstein more. However, I think Brett Weinstein got suckered into the Scott Adams debate. I think if Scott Adams sat down with Brett Weinstein, he could explain, and they would find a lot of common ground. But I think Brett's missing. I think he's a little too inside his own head and his own thinking about that. But I would prefer to have Brett Weinstein. Sam Harris, I've never thought highly of, and I mean ever. But anyhow, that's politics. We don't need to go all the way out. Rick, I forgot to get your super chat. Thank you, Rick. AI language model could be useful in script writing and concept art. Yeah, you know what? The writers directors can come up with the examples of their vision to share. I was thinking about doing a video where I just had AI write a script for me. It's like, AI, write me a script, and then we'll shoot it, and we'll just do it that way. That's an idea for me. That I was thinking. Super Collector Kark, dragging me back to the frame rate discussion. 48 FPS in Avatar, to me, felt like it had no motion blur. Is that the case? Can they not have added motion blur when you up the FPS? So a couple questions to dissect in there. When you up the FPS, you don't need the motion blur because essentially the motion blur is created by the FPS. So the thing that the piece that got me really realizing that the vision is closer to 10 frames a second than we it's a lot closer to 10 frames a second than we'd like to admit. It really is. I made a little demonstration where I took a dot and I put the dot on the frame for one frame, and I moved it to the next frame, and would go like that. Dot, 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 dot. It just moved every single frame. Now you would expect, right, to see dot, 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 like that. Boop, 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 boop. You would expect to see that. But at 24 frames a second, you don't see that. What do you see? 3 dots, 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 3 dots. The experience of watching 24 frames a second with discrete individual frames is your eye starts to blend those frames together into, and if you do the math, 24 frames a second is about 48, 30, was it about 42? It's 42 milliseconds is 24 frames a second. 42 milliseconds, and then a little bit more, that's about almost 100 milliseconds. If you see 3 dots, it means your eye is seeing about 100 milliseconds at a time. Yeah, 3 dots. You can try this if you have like After Effects. I'm going to probably do this in my video. Let's see. I'm going to try to do that in my video, in my frame rate, in my human eye video. I will demonstrate the little 3 dot idea. But it's also based on another topic, which is called Bloch's Law. I'll spoil it here. You guys are my fans. You'll watch the video, and I'll explain it better in the video. But so Bloch's Law says that if I show you a flash under 100 milliseconds, under 100, if I decrease the speed of that flash, if I increase or decrease the amount that flash shows, but I double the power, then you won't be able to tell the difference. So if I show you a 50 millisecond flash at, say, 1 lux or whatever we're going to call it, and I show you a 25 flash at 2 lux, you're going to look at them and say, I can't tell the difference between those 2 flashes. Because essentially, you guys are all kind of filmmaker adjacent, right? Shutter speed, right? It's the same amount of energy reaching that cell. But that effect happens at 100 milliseconds. So in some essence, you can kind of say that the human eye cell itself has sort of a 100 millisecond or 1/10 of a second shutter speed, right? You can kind of say that. I mean, it doesn't, again, don't make that leap. Don't try to make a camera model out of your biology, because the biology doesn't really mimic the camera. It's something completely different. But we notice that you can kind of, and I will demonstrate this with my video. I will show you a 1 frame flash and then a 2 frame flash. The 2 frame flash will feel brighter than the 1 frame flash. But if I show you a 3 frame flash and a 5 frame flash or 6 frame flash, they'll both equally look as bright. There's something that happens at that 100 milliseconds called Bloch's Law, B-L-O-C-H, Bloch's Law. If you want to look it up. It's actually where I learned about it was that Blurbusters video website. So all this stuff is fascinating. It's interesting. but it's not like, oh, we need to get rid of low frame rate because technology. Okay, so getting off the topic for a little bit. According to you, what sort of short films are film festivals' favorites? Good ones. I'm not kidding. It really is good ones. So I have been involved with, I've gotten my film into a few film festivals. My films are 25 minutes long, 22 minutes and then 25 minutes. Mine was, what you call it? I had one that was a straight kind of comedy / romantic comedy, sort of like I was talking about Fleabag. And the other one was more of a thriller. Now they got about 20% acceptance rate, maybe 15%, maybe lower than that. So it was pretty low, but that, in talking to other filmmakers, don't expect more than like 10, 20%. Unless you got like if you got like major stars in your movie, you get a better pass. So, but mine were 20 minutes. So the longer your short is, if you're in the 20-minute range, the better it needs to be. If you're in the 2-minute range or the 5-minute range or the under 10-minute range, as long as it's interesting, it's got something people can bite into, that's what they want to see. But ultimately, it has to be good. If it's just average, if it's so, they're not going to be so into it. Nate Dolar says, isn't that just persistence of vision? Talking about Block's. No, it's not. Not quite. I mean, yes and no. And the way I'm going to approach this is Block's law says that I can flash something at half the speed, but double the brightness. That means I can't tell how long the frame lasts. So my vision is essentially collecting that light for a certain amount of time, right? If I can double the brightness but decrease the speed, that means your ability to judge the speed of the flash, it doesn't exist below a certain threshold. That's how I'm going to with the that's how I'm going with that Block's law. And it's not a traditional way of looking at it, but I think it's appropriate. So the ideal film motion with no artifacts whatsoever would be flickering at 24 hertz. Not flickering at 24 hertz with 24. The flickering would be at least 48. 48 is pushing it close. You'd probably be flickering at 72 hertz at 24 frames a second. So a 3-bladed shutter is basically what it is. And the thing is also with the way the flickering works, the BFI. Matthews and I talk about this a lot in the comments, so I know we're kind of like, he's a commentator. And I wasn't angry with you the other day. I was just kind of annoyed with something else. But don't think of it that way. But anyhow, the flickering doesn't happen with the entire frame. And the Blur Busters did talk about this. The flickering is actually more of a rotating thing. So it's a scan down. So you would see part of the image and then it would scan all the way down and the next image would scan like that. And that exactly replicates the way a film projector works. That exactly replicates the way a CRT television works or CRT computer monitor. Anyhow. Persistence of vision is an optical illusion where human eye perceives continual presence at. That's another term that's called after image, right? Like there's the old technique of you stare at a black and white image, a reverse image, right? And then you close your eyes and you see the image, but it's like reversed and it's the proper color. That's what I love about these optical illusions is they show you how fallible your human perceptual system is. It's not like I'm not saying that your eyesight is bad or that being human is bad. I'm saying this is the cool part about being human. So that's really cool. Let's see what you say about Block's law. A rule of temporal summation stating that visual threshold is reached when luminance times duration reaches a constant. Yep. So essentially, yeah, it's like a shutter speed. It's the same concept with shutter speed. Right, I can half the shutter speed as long as if I half the shutter speed, I have to double my exposure or go up one stop. Right, same exact idea under a certain constant, which is going to be that 100 milliseconds. Is that constant? Yeah. So I mean, but that's the cool part about optical illusion. That's what's so fascinating and wonder. That's the wonder in me. Maybe I'm getting older and I'm like dealing with my mom who's like super. I don't know where she is as far as, where she with death. So I'm obviously I think about mortality in a lot of ways. I'm 40, so what immediately I think about mortality. But like this is the world and it's beautiful and it doesn't have to be. I play video games and every time it pans, I get a headache and it looks like a slideshow to me. It's like you want to basically throw away everything because it doesn't meet whatever you think your perception of. You're gonna throw away like a show like, and Matthews and I were talking, because we were commenting, and I got a little bit short because he was talking about this 1,000 frame second nonsense. This one guy, not him, but somebody else was commenting about 1,000 frames per second, and that's the future of how we're going to record movies, is recording 1,000 frames a second, and then use that to recreate 24 frames a second. It's like we're going to throw all of that away. We're going to throw away the ability to tell a human story, to make a connection with other human beings. We're going to basically throw away this empathy machine, which is one of the driving forces of technology. We're doing it now. You're watching me live stream. This is motion picture at 30 frames a second, 24, whatever I'm shooting over here. We're going to throw all of that away because we need to adhere to this 1,000 frame rate per second rule. We need this thing because that's what we need. No. On a side note, I think it's fascinating that reality is described discretely in frames like Planck time. But Planck time is so ridiculously obscure, like it's so short that that we as our human biology doesn't even, it's unfathomably short. Yeah, I love the technicals that I'm sharing. I hope so. Every time I do a video, it seems like recently when I do a technical video, people will say, I love it when you do technical videos. I hate when you do talk about movies that you love. I'm just joking. I'm not trying to knock on you guys. All right. I was talking about how red blur busters are flickering at different refresh rates, that the frame rate has its own motion artifacts. 30 FPS games and have double image artifacts. Yes, I think. And I think the double image artifact, again, with stuff like with 24 frames a second, because honestly, I think the triple bladed shutter is really the most common. I have a hard time believing everything was ran at 48 double bladed shutter. I think it's more of a triple bladed shutter because you see the engineering guy, who I obviously stole a lot of ideas from. Remember the engineering guy, the YouTube channel? I love his stuff. Bill Hammond, the engineering guy. Some people say I stole the red shirt from him. Not untrue, but I also love red, so there's that too. And red on black was just really popped out, so that's why I did the red shirt for a long time. Anyhow, Bill Hammond's showing that the projector. He has a video on the inner workings of a projector, and it's a triple bladed shutter. Even though it's like a classroom, a cheap industrial kind of 35 millimeter projector, it was triple bladed, right? So, I find those 1 billion FPS videos fascinating, even though it's a huge caveat. Well, 1 billion in slow motion. The slow mo guys, those guys that's pretty cool. Trying to find information about digital projectors. How is there flickering? I don't know. That you might have to bust out the manual for those Sony projectors. Maybe next time I go to a show or something, I will try to ask them about that. Imagine storing and editing 1,000 frames per second video. I know you definitely need a proxy for that. That was the thing. Like this guy was arguing that, we need to have 1,000 frames per second so that we can embed a motion blur so that we can recreate the look of 24 frames per second. That's like, how about we just shoot 24 frames a second? Why do we need to shoot 1,000 frames a second? Why don't we shoot 24 frames a second? Okay, maybe you have your 1,000 frame per second display. Okay, but your 1,000 frame per second display will have an algorithm in it that knows, okay, I'm going to get 24 frames a second. I'm going to show each image 3 times with a period of black in between. And I'm going to do it through a system of rotating shutter or whatever. And that would basically effectually mimic the look of a projector, the look of a traditional cathode ray tube television. Okay, but why do we need to have 1,000 frame rates to shoot in the first place? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Yeah, depends. Andre is saying depends on if it's LCD or DLP. Cinemas usually DLP. The question is how does the shutter work on a DLP? Is it just the way that the light is? Maybe perhaps it's the way the bulb is a flickering bulb. Perhaps I'm not sure. How does it work? Andre says he enjoys the filmmaker mode on LG C1. It feels cinematic. Also shows like Netflix on etc. So the thing about filmmaker mode, the only thing I would say is I think it needs to be the black frame insertion needs to be there. I think that if the filmmaker mode enables that, then I'm all for it. Because I was experimenting with my Sony OLED, this AJ108, I believe, or something like that. And I was experimenting with that. It does have 3 BFI modes. It's a 120 hertz BFI, another version of 120 hertz BFI, and a 60 hertz BFI. And I think in the dark room, the 60 is probably the smoothest looking, but I don't know if it was me just being tired or I don't know, maybe I was just trying to look for it, but the flickering does subconscious, or I don't know, just I feel like a little bit of eye strain looking at the 60 hertz. But the 120, it looks perfect. Anyhow. Account for comments says, I think he meant as a joke. The 1000 FPS guy? I don't think so. You haven't been to Blur Busters, have you? Those guys are hardcore high frame rate folks. Although it's ironic, the guy that writes the articles, Blur Busters, he's not anti-24 at all. At all. What do you dislike about the filmmaking in films at film festivals? Great question. Primarily, it's sound. If there's a bad aspect to the film, it's usually bad sound. Almost always, right? From a story perspective, there's a lot of self-importance in film festival films. That it's there are movies that say, hey, come along for this ride, that invite you to take part of the story. And then there are movies that basically say, look how great I am, look how great my story is, look how much I'm suffering, look at this, me. So it's movies that are like director focused versus movies that are audience focused. And I feel like when I go see it, and I haven't been to a film festival in like a decade, so okay, maybe I'm out of it. Maybe I'm out of this the running of it first. So, but as I remember when I was part of the circuit, did some film festival stuff, a lot of movies weren't audience focused. They were very much director focused. So that was my big complaint, I guess. I want to watch a movie where you invite the audience along for the story and you give the audience something that's interesting. So anyhow. Yep. Andre says, back to frame rate. You can't get away from it. What's nice about the new monitors is that VRR can allow you to adapt any frame rate. That means TV will show 25 and 25 for multiple. That's a good. I wonder what Fleabag was, because Fleabag was a BBC production, so you're automatically thinking 25 frames a second. Oh, the thing I didn't mention about Fleabag, 25 frames a second, but then I don't know if when Amazon gets it, they dump it down to 24. They might. I guess I would have to look at the runtime. Go to BBC, see if we can get the BBC originated, and look at the Amazon. If the runtime is slightly longer, then you know it's 24. But the thing about Fleabag is a comedy, it's a tragic comedy, but it's shot in 29.9. It's shot anamorphic. And I think it's like, I talk a lot about it, how aspect ratio is, you want to use the wider one for more serious movies. Comedies feel better in a full frame, 16:9 or 1.85. And here's a comedy that is shot in anamorphic widescreen. And there's something about it, and it lends a certain tone to the movie that wouldn't be there if it was shot 16:9. It's fascinating. But anyhow. Come on, John, you at least enjoyed the trumpet solos. The best part of Babylon was the trumpet solos. Absolutely, I agree. Especially the part where the elephant like pinches its butt cheeks and then shits on the camera. I'm just joshing with you. All right. Oh, so, yeah. Some people were complaining filmmaker mode is not strict enough. The image gets too dark. The image grading can be bad on TVs that are not high end. Yeah, you know what I've noticed? So Netflix has this Netflix mode. So if I turn on Netflix, and I bought their high end Netflix thing because like I got a nice TV, I'm going to pay for the high-end Netflix. And I switch it to Netflix enabled. Like I let Netflix take over my TV controls because it has that option, right? And I do that, and I do not like the image. I'm like, oh, they got rid of my motions, my BFI. That's the first thing to go. It's like, everything looks really stuttery now. So, yeah, I know you broke. I broke the promise first, Matthews. So anyhow, let's see. Matthews, I could not find information on the manual of mine, and I think it's not flickering. As I see anything with 24 FPS, 240 FPS slow mo shot, but you get that color breaking. Account for comment: isn't that due to audience and film festivals are assumed to be cinephiles or marketed to directors as tours? Yeah, I think so. You know, like I think it's weird. So I was in the Las Vegas Film Festival and I was going to the after party, and I got in the elevator with one of the programmers. And I didn't say, "Hey, how you doing? I'm John. What do you do?" "Oh, I'm a programmer." And he kind of gave me kind of an off. He's like, "Oh yeah, my film's pitch black." He kind of like gave me a little bit of a snot. I couldn't tell if he was being like, maybe he just didn't want to be bothered, but he's like, "Yeah, oh, your film's okay, pitch black, okay." He's kind of like dismissive of me. And then, and then the party, I didn't think of anything of it. Like, whatever, it's cool. He just wanted to talk to me. That's fine. But then my film ended up winning the best film at that festival. And I was like, what the hell? Why would my short movie win this thing? I mean, I don't know what it meant to be like, oh, best picture at the Las Vegas Film Festival. I don't know what that meant. They gave awards to everybody that screened, so I don't know. So yeah, the programmers, when they watch the movies, I'm sure they are inundated with a lot of crap. Let's be honest, and you have to watch a lot of crap, because if there's so many stories, you see, oh, I submitted my film to this film festival and they stopped watching after 10 minutes. Well, it's like, well, maybe because your film sucked. I don't know. But as a programmer, you got paid. This guy paid his entrance fee. The programmer's got to watch the movie all the way through. That's just the reality. That's the game. That's what you signed up for as a programmer. But I don't know. I could see people just being really hard, really being harsh on movies, film festivals. And as Troy said, every film festival is different. Left Hand Puppetry says, on past stream, we recommended vintage lenses that worked well for BMP pocket camera. Do you happen to recall which ones? Nikon lenses were, at the time, Nikon manual lenses from the 80s and 90s, or 80s, 70s, and 80s were really cheap. Maybe they still are, but like you used to be able to get like a 24 millimeter manual lens for like $30 back on eBay back in the early 2000s, before the DSLRs became popular. I don't know what they go for now, but like Nikon manual lenses from the 70s, 80s, generally relatively cheap, and they still work pretty good. But you're not going to get a cinema level lens. It's going to have some character to it. But Nikon, those old Nikons, and you can get Nikon to adapt to whatever mount you want. So, is hearing more sensitive than sight? Well, it's simpler than sight. Like the other thing I didn't mention this about human vision, is most of the gray goo that's in this part of our body, most of this stuff here is actually purposed for vision. Like the visual cortex has more neurons. I believe this number, but I don't know if it's true or not. There are more neurons in your brain dedicated to vision processing than all your other senses combined. All of them, right? That's how much your brain dedicates to vision. So there's a lot of processing going on up there. So essentially, it might be slower in that terms. Like your ear is more rudimentary in evolutionary terms than your vision. Vision's very, very advanced or very complicated compared to the sound. So, anyhow. Count for Comment says, I heard there's a rule that if they don't like it in the first 5 minutes, they can stop. There's no time to judge every film. Not necessarily. I don't, I used to be a blog site. If you go on a site like No Film School, which I honestly don't read anymore, but you'll see a lot of those sites have articles like they said. I sent out my video through Vimeo private, so it allows you to judge how many views. And some people say, oh, they watched a minute or so. Well, maybe you're right. It depends on the film festival. Some of the film festivals have rules, some of them don't. I imagine every film festival is being different. All right, let's go back here. Random people complain that Dolby Vision is dark on their TV models. The other thing I want to dispel too, I'll get there with BFI, is, if you want a theater experience, you need to watch your TV in the dark. You can't have a theater experience in a room with a bright windows. So I'm wondering if that's what happened with Dolby Vision. Is like Dolby Vision's attempting to like simulate the theater experience, but the theater experience, you watch a movie in almost total darkness. So you need to watch your TV in darkness, or at least darker room, unless you're willing to just give up certain aspects. And like BFI, the argument against BFI is that it dims the image. Okay, it dims the image. If you want your image to be super bright, then you're going to have to accept the fact that you can't use BFI. There's trade-off. So it's not like you can't have everything. Does Zeiss make cheap lenses lately? No, I don't think so. Oh, here we go. Here's a good question. Another topic, copyright law. The first Mickey Mouse version from iconic cartoon in 1927 going to be in the public domain next year. What do you think? I think it's perfectly okay. Let me finish up your comment here. Nate Dollar. What a BFI big effing image. Exactly. Possibility Mickey Mouse keeping under control is trademarking. Why do you explain the long time Disney opens their animated films with Mickey from Steamboat Willie? All right, so here's the deal. Mickey Mouse, Steamboat Willie will fall in the public domain. I have no question about it will do that. There is no concerted effort. Believe me, they're not. Congress is not writing new copyright law, and they don't have to, because, as you stated, the Mickey Mouse is trademark. He is trademark protected. Here's the thing, too. Let's pull up Steamboat Willie. Let's do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to show you how fair use works. Steamboat Willie. Let's pull it up real quick. Steamboat Willie. Hopefully you don't get a bunch of porn. Oh, here it is. Steamboat Willie, which you can absolutely watch 100% for free on YouTube. So, as much as you say, the YouTube, they're all taking, I'm trying to change my URL here. Control V. Nope, as much as you want to say that if Disney loses the copyright to Steamboat Willie is such a disaster, it really isn't. Why is it not pasting? There we go, paste. All right, hit OK. And there we go. All right, so I can take this over here, fade over. There's my Steamboat Willie. And we're playing Steamboat Willie here, right? Again, Walt Disney Studios is putting this out there for free. Completely free. Anybody can click on it and watch it. Let's jump ahead. All right, that's a bad freeze frame for Mickey there. You guys can still hear me, right? Yeah. All right, let's just play from right there. I can pause it. All right, let's take a look at that drawing of Mickey. One of the things you'll notice right away, or you should notice right away, he's not wearing gloves. The modern Mickey Mouse wears gloves, right? The modern Mickey Mouse wears gloves. What else do we say? He's not wearing a shirt. Modern Mickey Mouse wears shirts. Like if we compare that Mickey to the Mickey Mouse from like Disneyland, you're going to see a lot of differences. A lot of differences. So the question is, well, the fact that this falls in the public domain, well, sure, that means anybody can take this movie and remake it. But the thing is, it's still representative of the character of Mickey Mouse. And the character of Mickey Mouse has become sort of a spokesperson for Disney. But again, not the same thing. not the same design. Like the nose is slightly different. The ears are a little bit different. Let's see if we can go to a little further down the line. The whole original Mickey Mouse drawing is completely different than what's being used today. I mean, it's got some similarities. Like the modern Mickey now does have eyelids. You know, here he doesn't have eyelids. There's just a lot of different elements about the Mickey that are safe from the just because it goes in the public domain doesn't mean they lose access to the trademark part of it. Does that make sense? Hopefully that's coming across. I wanted to do a video about this. Let me go back to me here. Weep. There's an article that was written by a legal analysis. It was a really good article about why the arguments for public domain are not as solid as you guys, as they are made out in the public sphere. Part of the argument too was like that Mickey Mouse, just because he's in the public domain doesn't mean he can't be used in the trademark. Yeah, Mickey Mouse is more of a rat. It's more of a rat in the start, yeah. Yep. And Andre agrees with me. OLED really lose their advantage when watching it in a well-lit room. Yeah. Yeah, I think that to me is gotta be one of the things that people need to realize is like, yes, you can watch it in a well-lit room because it's got such brightness. Yes. Doesn't mean you're getting the optimal performance in a well-lit room. It's like, you know, like I want a theater experience, but I want to have my windows wide open. It's like, no, that's not a theater experience. This Willie is at 12 FPS. I think you're probably right. Disney started with the Oswald, the Lucky Rabbit, a lot more this year. Oswald joined the public domain. Oh, really? That's kind of cool. Again, you know, the public domain is important because it is the well which we draw from for inspiration. It allows us to have, you know, to be able to pull from all kinds of things, you know. And I don't think, you know, some young kid can watch Steamboat Willie and be inspired to draw his own cartoon about a steamboat driver who, I don't know, does stuff, gets angry. I don't know. I don't know the plot of Steamboat Willie. Sorry, guys. I've never really watched the whole thing. But the thing is, you just can't copy it. And I'm totally cool with that. As long as we understand, we have to take a very firm stance on fair use. What fair use is, and we understand the difference between idea and expression, the idea to expression divide. If we can concretely make that, and the problem is, the general public is the general public's understanding of copyright only exists if it's beneficial for them. There's no understanding of like fairness in terms of copyright in the general sphere. That's what I'm talking about. If you like the person, then you will support the person's misuse of copyright law. If you don't like the person, then you will think everything that all the copyright issues that they're bringing forward are bad. Like if you don't like, you hate the fact that Disney's a big company, therefore all the copyright cases they're bringing forth are all evil and terrible and late stage capitalism. But if you like the creator, if you're like, oh, this poor guy, he made a movie and this other movie looks kind of similar to his, he has a right. They stole his idea. It's like, no, like pick a lane. That's the problem. People don't understand copyright. Well, they don't understand the reality of how this stuff is. Anyhow. The only benefit for Steamboat Willie is falling in public domain is that you can have it playing on a screen in the background of your own film, TV show without getting... Questionable. And here's why. So here's why I would not advise you playing Steamboat Willie in the background. And you have to be very, very careful how you approach that because of trademark infringement. I made a video about trademark infringement, and it basically comes down to they call it the Rogers test, which is basically, does the person watching your movie, can they assume that your use of their trademark, which Mickey Mouse is still a trademark of Disney. So even though he looks different in Steamboat Willie, he's still Mickey Mouse. He's still associated with a Disney company. If you're watching your movie and they're seeing Steamboat Willie in the background, does the viewer get the mistaken understanding that your movie is in some way connected to the Disney Corporation? So that's the fine line, right? Are people confused? Like, hey, you must have gotten Disney's permission, or you must have been on Disney's or promoting Disney in some way. Now, can you make a case for that in certain respects? Like, hey, it's just in the background. Doesn't mean, yeah, you could, but trademark law being that you have to, when you see an infraction of trademark, you have to pursue it. So in essence, the Disney Corporation may be fiduciarily, that's a big fancy word, fiduciary responsible to go after you for using that trademark, even if it's not a trademark violation in a strict term. So be very, very careful with that. Very, very careful with that. Yeah, it's all lawyer speak. Keep goodwill is better for all, when you see it. Yeah. Yeah, the thing is, the problem is, like, the whole story about that one kindergarten that did a mural of all the Disney characters on their wall for the kindergartners, and Disney shut them down for it, right? It said you can't do that. And people got upset because, oh, Disney, come on, Disney, these are just kids, man, the kindergartners. True, but they're using a trademark. They're using trademark for purposes that they're not involved with. Say that kindergartner has some can I say this online? Say it has some P words that go there, and there's a big molestation scandal around that kindergarten. Well, now every news story in front, they see that Disney wall. It's like, oh shoot, now they basically smeared Disney by being involved, and Disney has no control over what's happening at that kindergarten preschool or whatever it is. So, that's totally unfair. Why should they be allowed to smear someone else's good name or whatever? They can do just as good enough job smearing their own name. Trust me. But that's the problem. It's like you when you use those trademark things, you create confusion in the marketplace, and then that can lead to issues. Like, it's basically like not catfishing, but it's impostering kind of a thing. PDF, is that the term for it? I don't know. All right. I'm ignorant. Does Disney remaking their own films using their own characters extend the copyright? It's so in a way, yes and no. In some ways, so what happens when you remake a movie? The copyright now exists on the new movie. So, like, if Steamboat Willie was remade, then the Steamboat Willie movie would now have a copyright starting today for 90 years because of the copyright law for work for hire. The original Steamboat Willie now falls in the public domain. So now the thing is, so they remade the movie. They now have ownership of the story of this new movie. So essentially, if the story of the new movie basically mirrors the old movie, they've kind of, in essence, created a new copyright on this new product they created. However, the old product is still public domain. Does that make sense? So in essence, it's sort of like just making a new work based on an old work that you have rights to. That doesn't mean that the old work is not public domain. So you can still use the old work, you can still incorporate the old work, but the story and the ideas, well, not say the ideas, but the story, the specifics of the story are now part of the new product too. Does that make sense? Yeah, hardcore, because Disney doesn't want any affiliation with the P word stuff. As I said, Disney does fine taking care of their own name, right? You don't need some weird other company that doesn't control what they do. Anyhow, that's the idea with extending copyright. So it's not an extension of copyright. It's just now they have a copyright on this new product, which happens to mirror the old product. So another example like this would be, so example of this showed up here when the movie Aladdin came out. And Aladdin obviously is based on a thousand-year-old story, right? It goes way, way back. The original Aladdin was Chinese. It was a Chinese story. It was in part of Arabian Nights, but it was a Chinese boy, Aladdin was the name of the character. And what was my point? Okay, so when the movie came out, there was another cartoon made that was very similar. It was also called Aladdin, but it was made by one of these we call a mockbuster movie. Mockbusters are basically, we heard Disney's making a big, cool Aladdin movie, so let's make a cheap Aladdin movie we can put out in like 6 months, a cartoon we can put out in 6 months, and try to ride the wave of all the marketing that's happening around the big movie. That's what Asylum does, a lot of these companies do. So they made an Aladdin movie, and they got sued by Disney. I forget. I think they won that one. I believe they won because the genie in the mockbuster was not blue. The genie was yellow, and the genie had a mustache, not a goatee. So like there was a lot of elements that were significantly different than the blue genie of the Aladdin, the Disney version of Aladdin, right? So those are the details. Now, so let's say 90 years from now happens, and they want to extend the copyright of that. So they make another remake of the Disney movie, again with a blue genie. So now that new movie that has the blue genie in it, they can protect that because you can't have a blue Aladdin with a blue genie in it. Because we now the 1991 version is now out of public domain, but the new version has a blue genie. Therefore, we're holding on to the blue genie, right? And people might immediately think, well, they're trying to like huddle their idea and all that. Well, okay, but just make a movie without a blue genie. Why does the blue genie need to be? Make one with a red genie. Make one with a green genie or something different. Yeah, a comment says a Syrian story about a Chinese boy dealing with Chinese sultans that injected the Arab 1001 Nights cultural heritage. Yeah. So, I mean, that's what I meant. I mean, it wasn't a Chinese story. It wasn't like a Chinese origin story, but it was about a Chinese boy. I remember reading 1001 Nights. I don't remember much other than that, but it was pretty cool. I went to Disney is basically French for, oh, really? I did not know that. I won't say it because I might get in trouble on YouTube. I don't know what that. I hate when YouTube does 720 60p. If you want 24 frames a second, you have to do 480. I hate 60 frames a second. It does look like home movies. Why does 720 go to 660? There ought to be a 720 24 version flavor. So here in the old days, and this is going back to for those of you young enough not to understand broadcast systems. 720 only came in 60p. In the broadcast world, 720 is only 60p. That's it, period. There's no other frame rate. 720 is 60 frames a second. That's what all the Disney channels, that's all the Disney channels like ESPN, ABC, and all the Disney-owned channels, Nat Geo and all that, they're all 720, right? And then the other flavor is 1080 60i interlaced. So 60i can essentially be 60i interlace can be you can embed a 30p stream into a 60i, or you can embed a 24p into a 60i, because 60i is that interlacing. You can have different flavors inside the 60i. There isn't a 720 30p 24p in the old days. Now when computers got better, now you can do anything in any frame rate, right? So maybe that's what the 720p is. I don't know. Andre asked, back in FPS, if you film something at 24 FPS, the camera will add motion blur due to shutter speed. Correct. But if you render at 24 on a PC, it will stutter as it has not motion blur. Yes, that's right. You might be able to see it in some of my videos. When I do graphics are the main key. And like some of my videos, I might have turned off the motion blur, but there are a couple in the very beginning of my videos when my name goes across the frame, I add motion blur as the name was, and then it flies off. So if I don't add the motion blur, it will like stutter harder as it does that. So that's a when you work with After Effects, sometimes you want that like more of a staccato, sticky feel. If you want a sharper, kind of more crisper look. And then you just have to be more careful how fast you move your graphics around. But in After Effects, there is a click and you click on add motion blur. So any graphics that you have moving will blur a little bit, and it does make it feel smoother. Definitely feel smoother. My brain is hurting. I know, mine is too a little bit. Yeah. I love slow motion for 240 FPS. Absolutely. Yeah, slow motion. Well, there's no other way to obtain slow motion other than shoot higher frame rate and then show it at a lower frame. That's how you get slow motion. I love The Incredibles, Spider-Man, Spider-Verse, Batman, Mask of the Phantasm. Oh, God, I love that movie. I love Warner Brother animation movies of Batman. I just love them so much. Superheroes are better suited for animation, and it seems like animation loves. And Batman is so malleable in animation. You get to do so much with Batman. I just love Batman. Sorry, guys. I have a love affair with Batman. All right. Andre says, so 1080i is the same as how movies were telescene for NTSC, where you had the reverse process to use reverse tele back to the original FPS. Right. So the terminology would have been PSF, which is partial segmented frame. So just basically telecine, right? Well, it's that 3-2 pull down stuff where you basically embed three frames over, or a frame over 3 interlaced portions, and the next frame over 2 interlaced portions. And then you can work backwards too. You can get 24p out of the 60i stream, and vice versa. But the terminology inside the workflow would be PSF. In fact, when I put PSF on my camera here, you will see the interlacing lines. I won't do it now because I have to go dig through the manual. And I for a while, got really pissed off. I had one guy that would just complain about and tell me how to operate my camera because he saw the interlaced lines as I waved my hands, because I had PSF turned on my camera, because in the old days you would always turn your PSF on in order for it to work. Nowadays it's not that crucial anymore, but you would see the interlacing going on. Anyhow, oh my God, thank you. Any work on the comic book lately? No, I haven't. I need to get back on it. So it's closer to Fleabag, believe it or not. The book I was writing was basically, it's a love story between two characters, and the conceit of the story. I guess I'm not, whatever. No one's going to watch this and steal it, I don't think. But the conceit of the story is it's two people falling in love. Well, they're not necessarily falling in love. Their relationship is more of one of a location, of availability. Basically, the whole plot of the story is they have inside their heads 4 characters that are a representation of their psyche, and their past relationships, and so those relationships act as a Greek chorus, and they talk about. They argue amongst themselves. They reveal the past, and we see these two characters sort of kind of falling in love, or maybe not. They're falling in love. I'm going to end the first book on a cliffhanger, kind of with the love. So it's sort of like 2 Greek choruses on the male and female side, and they're kind of trying to find a relationship between the two of them. And I got about halfway through the second part of the book. So broken down to three books. It's all going to be in one book if I ever fucking finish it. Sorry, cursing my way out of here. But I'm halfway through the second one, just sketching it, and I need to finish sketching and then go back and ink it and paint it and all that stuff. But I really should just take some time. It's like, you know what? And when I do work on it, it's cathartic. It does feel like I'm doing something with my life rather than just, because like yesterday I just totally did nothing. I felt so awful. And I talked to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT told me, hey, don't worry about it. You have to, you can have ambition. You can have ambitions to do stuff, but you are in a role that you're a caregiving role. So you have to pull back a little bit, realize what's realistic. Not necessarily you have to eliminate all your ambitions, but be a little less ambitious. Anyhow. Yeah, it was horrible back in the 90s when some TV shows were converted from 59 to PAL. Not even blurry, we had super bad motion. Yeah, and vice versa. The 25 to 50, 25 to 60 FPS is a little bit weird. It can also have a little bit of weird motion artifacting too, because 25 doesn't really work in any mathematical sense with 60, because the pull down would be 3 2 2 2. So there's an extra, like, it's an extra, instead of an even, like 3 2 3 2 3 2 3 2 2 2 3 2 2 2 3 2 2. So it has that extra little hiccup with it. Yeah, Robin is always harder to do with. I'm talking about Batman Robin. Robin never works in live action because the kid fighting, like, whether it's the three different types of Batman, three different Robins, right? Robin just, especially the youngest Robin, is always a kid. That's what I love. I really love the Harley Quinn show, and they depicted Robin as a 12-year-old kid, and he's just like a bratty little kid, Teen Titan kind of a thing. Anyhow. Cristoforo says 1080i is I when I equals interlaced, 1080p when P equals progressive. Right, that's correct. Yeah, and the always thing people always get into a ruffle. The P stands for progressive. It does not stand for pixel. So people say 480p. Well, that's 480 progressive, not 480 pixels. Right. And people always say, well, no, P stands for pixels, man. What's wrong? It's like 240p. There's no such thing as 240i. It's sort of what they call a portmanteau or whatever, or a backronym. Sort of a backronym in that it's a thing, but like it's been revised to be something else. The Left-Hand Puppetry said a storyboard for... That's my theory with the comic book. It essentially is a storyboard. It's sort of a storyboard, getting ideas of how the characters react, how the actors in the head relate with each other. The story been kicking around so long. I just need to finish it, because there's a character whose name is like, when we first wrote it, his name was 2012. Why? Because he was the first mistake of 2012. That's how old the story was. So I've updated that to be 2020. So he's the first mistake of 2020. But not the worst thing that happened that year. That's the joke on that thing. Oh yeah, Patrick Williams made a video on Robin. That's cool. I like Patrick Williams. I watched a little bit of his latest video, but it was like 45 minutes long. I was like, I enjoyed his latest video was about how to talk about movies, which I thought was pretty decent. The 60s Robin worked well. There's an animated series of Batman on. It's on, all the stuff is on HBO Max. HBO Max is my go-to right now for streaming services. It goes HBO Max, Amazon, HBO Max, Netflix, Amazon. Those are the three I watch. Netflix to a lesser degree. I don't find that much stuff on Netflix, but I love HBO Max. There's this really bizarre animated Batman where they bring back, and this is when he's still alive. They brought back. What's his face from played Batman, the 60s version. They brought back Burt Ward, and they actually brought back some of the original actors to voice a cartoon Batman designed to look like the 60s Batman. And it had a lot of the old Batman jokes, like, Robin, we must cross the street right away. So they're like, come on, let's go. And then they go to the crosswalk and they wait for the light to turn on, and then they cross the walk. So it's got like a lot of that. It felt to me, it had some funny parts, but it felt to me a little bit too self-aware. So I ended up not watching the whole thing. But I mean, it's what I mean. Batman is so malleable in the animated form. There's so much you can do with that character. Somebody was saying he was kind of Mary Sue. Yeah, a little bit. But that's what the thing is. Batman's never the most interesting character. I mean, sometimes he kind of is when he's dealing with his own not his own bullshit from the past. He can be an interesting character, but really, you go to the Batman for the Rogues Gallery. The Rogues Gallery can't be beat with Batman. I mean, the other night I was watching a documentary about it was a French documentary on HBO Max about supervillains, and that was what they're saying. It's like Batman's Rogue Gallery is just the best. Maybe Spider-Man comes close, but Batman's is the best. Because they're the most interesting and the most bizarre and weird. And they come from like a Dick Tracy kind of a background where all the bad guys are just really bizarre and weird, right? Sorry, I hit the microphone there. So anyhow, I watched the middle and thought it was 4K because of how good it looked. When I looked, it was only 720p. So much for 8K TV sets. Yeah, that's the truth. Resolution is not about resolution. Only takes you so far, especially if you shoot everything in shallow depth of field. Then resolution, who cares? All the creators from the 60s or the very earlies were dead. The 60s are still sort of fresh. What was the name of that Batman? Dang it, Batman. 60s. Adam West. That's right, Adam West, Burt Ward. Animation, HBO Max. Let's see. So, not Batman the Animated Series. Batman Return of the Cape Crusaders, I think was the name of the... Yep, here it is. Oh, someone's trying to call me. Call right back. All right, I'm going to wrap it up pretty soon here because it is about 5 o'clock, dude. But let's see. I'll just show you this real quick on my screen set top here. Whoops. Oh, there he goes. Yeah, so this is the Batman, the Return of the Cape Crusader. We probably can't hear the sound because I think the sound's not on. But there's Adam West and Burt Ward, and it's got that classic look to it. So back to me. Now back to you. Back to me. All right, so I'm going to wrap it up here. It is about 5 o'clock. Any last minute comments before I go? I'm going to try to shoot that frame rate of the human eye tomorrow. I don't know when I'll have it finished because next week is going to be kind of a busy week for me. I've got like 3-4 things going on next week. It's going to be exciting. Batman the Animated Series is really good. Yeah, it still holds up. A friend of mine was like, we were talking about it. Like, he's like, yeah, but is it still hold up? I was like, yeah, it still holds up. So, let's see. So kids today watch documentaries about the 90s. I know. We are as far away from the 90s as my generation was from the 60s. Oh, crap. Oh, man. That's not good. Oh, no hats in my store? I'll look into that. When I first set up the store, Teespring did not offer hats. They might now. So maybe I can make put some hats up. I need to put some more stuff on that store. So thanks for bringing it up. Cool. All right. Well, thanks guys for hanging out with me. I hope you had a good time today, listening to me babble on about whatever I feel like talking about. Hopefully address some of your comments. And we didn't talk too much about frame rate, although hopefully we talked a little bit enough to whet your frame rate appetite. All right, guys. Well, I am going to take off now. Make sure the comments last minute. So we shall see you guys later. All right, guys. I'm taking off. We'll take care now. Have a good week. See you later. Bye-bye. Let me do this. Let's do it the right way. We're going to fade to black.